Madam Speaker. Now, there's a few things I think that we need to remember today. We're hearing one version from the Liberals over there. First of all, we need to remember Mr. Atwal's background. He's actually a longtime friend of the Liberal Party. He's actually someone who's known the Prime Minister in the past. So for them to pretend that they don't know anything about him is just to try to mislead Canadians. The Parliamentary Secretary opposite said there's only one version on this. Well, there's actually four versions. There's Daniel Jean's version, there's the Prime Minister's version, there's the Foreign Affairs Minister's version, and there's Mr. Atwal's version. So, Madam Speaker, I think it's reasonable that the opposition should be asking questions about which one of those is true. When the government says that they believe that there's a non-partisan public service and that they trust them, what I think they're saying is that we trust that Daniel Jean's not going to tell what really happened. That's one of the reasons I suspect that they're going to try to keep him from coming to committee, because I think that when we hear from him, we'll hear that they actually are using a non-partisan public service to try to achieve their goals. So I'm going to ask the member at the other end of the House here, why do you think that Canadian MPs are being asked to settle for less information and less access to Mr. Jean than the media has already had? Well, thank you, Madam Speaker. And I pointed out earlier, there are several different stories here. My colleagues pointing out that so well that we want to find out what is actually going on here. The government's argument is that somehow the public service is being impacted here. I'm just wondering if a member can tell me if he thinks that the National Security Advisor to the Prime Minister is just one more public servant. I'm wondering if he can tell me also why he thinks the government is refusing to allow the National Security Advisor to come into an environment where he can speak freely to members of Parliament.
You have to allow him to answer. There just wasn't a lot of time. Honorable Deputy de Louis
The journalists had the chance to have that kind of briefing. All Canadians must have that kind of briefing. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I want to thank my colleague for the great job he's doing here today. A very interesting speech. I just wanted to maybe change the direction a little bit. Daniel Jean is not your average civil servant. The guys across the way today would be trying to convince us that there's some sort of attack on the civil service here, but this is the person whose career has actually led him to the position of National Security Advisor. And I guess I'd like my colleague to answer a question about whether he believes that the Liberals are actually damaging Mr. Jean's reputation, because I don't think any of us believe that he came out and did that security briefing without being pushed out by the Liberals to come out and to give it. And so I'm just wondering, the PM refuses to give clarity. There's no clarity from the Foreign Affairs Minister, and Canadians, they really don't think that Mr. Jean came up with this story on his own. So I'm just wondering if the member can comment. Do you think the Liberals will continue working to destroy Mr. Jean's career, or will they let him come forward and be clear on what really happened that day and speak to the rest of the members of Parliament?
For Markham Unionville.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank my honourable friend for the wonderful question. Again, going back to the National Security Advisor with the 35 years experience, for the Prime Minister to refuse him to come to the Public Safety Committee is tarnishing his reputation, because he can tell something to the public on one side, but at the same time he cannot tell to the elected MPs in the Public Safety Committee. There are too many stories, too many conflicts, conflict between the countries. It's the biggest conflict I've seen since I live here for 44 years in this country, between Canada and India. So this one is going to go worse. What we understand is the day Prime Minister left India, the tar from the chickpeas was doubled or put up to 60%. Either is it a punishment, or is it a disagreement, or is it a coincidence? I would know the answer. But sending the National Security Advisor to the committee will clear the air in no time. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.